There we go. Hi, guys. Welcome to the final exam review for SLP 214. Very excited to be doing this today. I love doing the final before we do this study session. What I do is I go through and I take it. No notes, nothing, just to see how it goes, if there's any questions that trip me up, because I've been going through the material the same as you guys have this whole semester, right? So I always enjoy doing that. It's what do we have? 48 questions. We have true and false questions, true false questions. Some of them might be true and some of them might be false. Write in the definition of blank, right? So there's two questions where you're going to have to type in a little bit longer of an answer. What is the definition of this? There are some fill in the blank and multiple choice questions as well. Think about your fill in the blank will be questions such as a child is saying this for this. What is the phonological process, right? Another fill in the blank would be what is the phonetic transcription of this, or what does this phonetic transcription, how do you write that in English alphabet? This is based on modules 1 through 15 overall. So remembering that it's the whole course, right? So we're going all the way back to your IPA in the beginning, and that will be on your final, which is why I've talked a little bit about making sure that you're staying up to your date with your IPA and using it in your assignments. So it's still coming as second nature for you. Um, and then remembering that you can use a note card. I think on the final exam, let me just double check. It says 4 by 6, I think, instead of 3 by 5. I can't really measure your note card anyway, but 4 by 6 is acceptable this time around. So a little bit more room than normal. I think that's good. Remembering that you're using this as something to trigger your brain to think about different areas, maybe something that's really hard for you to remember. You always have a hard time remembering what subglottal versus supraglottal is, right? So you're going to have that on there. You're not going to sit there and write down the entire IPA because hopefully you can think through it at this point. So yeah, great things to do is review your midterm, right? Utilize the midterm as well, your quizzes that you've gone over, your assignments. And again, I love that IPA cheat sheet assignment that you did at the beginning, where you're sitting there and you're saying, pen, boy, just because it really does get your mind thinking about the IPA. Yeah. Any questions about that information so far?
You did mention that we will have to put some into IPA. And is there a way that we change our keyboard, or will it probably just be whatever is okay?
Yep.
All right.
So
Just
you can
making
know that,
sure I
like,
didn't.
yeah. So we know that you're not able to type like the SH symbol easily on
Right.
your keyboard, right? So if it is a word with that, then you're going to be writing it into English transcription. You're sitting there trying to think of a vowel and you have to write it in IPA, it's probably not a schwa,
Right.
right? Because you can't write that with your keyboard. So another great test taking thought process too there is knowing that like, hey, I can only use the letters available to me.
Yes. Okay.
Symbol.
Perfect.
So thinking about test taking strategies and tips, I just want to make sure we talk about these because I think it's important. Remembering that you are an online learner, but you still have to treat yourself as a learner, right? So think about in traditional schooling when you were coming in, you were taking the time to review your notes beforehand, right? You were taking the time to ensure that you were talking to a classmate about something that you didn't understand. So you can go back into an old lecture if you need to. And really refreshing before you sit down to take your exam. And then have that moment, right? Remember sitting next to your friend in class and they saying, hey, you got this, right? Remember how hard you studied. We can do this, right? So remember to have that moment with yourself as well. That's going to be part of your preparation. So one of the biggest things that you can do for yourself is prepare because preparation is 100% in your control. I was an athlete in college, and this was one of the biggest things we always talked about was when you're going into an exam, when you're going into a game, you want to make sure that you can rely on your preparation. The way you do that is taking the time to study, right? That's where you're going to be able to be confident going into it. Plan out where you're going to take your exam. Make sure your area is clean and ready to go. Prepare your testing environment. Eat a good meal beforehand. Nobody thinks well without food in their stomachs, right? Make sure that you have some food in your stomach and that pep talk. I love a pep talk for myself because if you believe in you, everyone else will too. So we talked about preparing, refreshing. Then lastly, while you're taking your exam, pause. Just take a moment. Read the question a second time. You can read it, multiple times overall, right? If you get a little bit nervous or worried when you're starting to read it, like, I don't know this, there's no way, stop for a second, take your deep breath and reread it, right? Identify what the question is asking, identify what you do know, and then look at the answer choices. If it's multiple choice, it's pretty fun to be able to say, wow, that answer is definitely not the right one, so I don't even need to look at that. Well, now I only have three answers left. Great. Can I find another one that's not right? Or do I know something about this that tells me, okay, these two answers are correct? So take the time to really put yourself in the spot to be able to perform your best overall. Let's dive into it a little bit. So our study guide, your study guide is very all-encompassing. I'm going to do a quick just run through. I'm going to go through each of the topics. If there is a question that you have, feel free to raise your hand or unmute yourself. If I don't see you, I'm very sorry. I will try and pay attention. If you need to put it in the chat too, I should be able to see that. So on our study guide, let me just pull up one more thing. Okay. I'm going to start with anatomy. I know it's towards the bottom of your study guide, but I have mine organized just a little bit more for how my brain works. So we'll start with anatomy right now. So supraglottal, remember supraglottal, this region right here, your glottis is that vocal folds, that area between your vocal folds. It's also known as your larynx. Okay, so supraglottal would be above, subglottal, think of your submarine, below. When we're talking about supraglottal, above the glottis, this is your pharynx, your oral cavity, and your nasal cavity. So pharynx, oral cavity, our mouth, and then your nasal cavity. When we go into subglottal, the below, these are your lungs, your trachea, and your diaphragm. The tongue. Remember that your tongue is anchored to the floor of your mouth, right? And we talked a little bit about tongue ties towards the end. That's your frenulum underneath your tongue that comes forward, or it doesn't come forward, it's all the way attached when you have a tongue tie. Everyone has a frenulum under your tongue. It's just that little attachment right there, right? So that attachment is your frenulum. It holds your tongue or it anchors your tongue to the floor of your mouth. Remember that you have your central nervous system, which is your CNS, and your peripheral nervous system, right? Your PNS. So CNS, central, includes your brain and your spinal cord. When we're talking about your PNS, that is the peripheral nervous system. Those are the nerves that run from the brain or spinal cord to the muscles and the lower motor neurons. Okay. IPA. Make sure you go through the IPA, the sounds, how they're made, understand what a bilabial is, what a labial dental is, be able to go transcription from IPA to English and English to IPA. We'll practice this a little bit later with some of our questions. Know the number of sounds in a word, and then be able to say where a sound is located, if it's in the beginning, the middle, or the end or final position of a word. You have to be able to describe a sound by its place, manner, and voicing. So describe by place, manner, and voicing, right? We would say that is a velar stop and it's voiceless. And then if your articulator is doing this, then what sound do you make would be another test question that you want to make sure is going to be on there. We'll do some practice of your IPA in our review, and then that'll also let you know if you need to freshen up on it even more. Um, we're going to dive into some of our speech sound disorders now, right? So remembering that that was the first part of our course. Our first course was what are the items, the body parts that we use to create all of these sounds, and then how are we producing them as English American speakers, right? And then how are you producing them overall? What parts of your body are you using? And now we're going to go into how do we work with them as speech language pathology assistants. So our first one is articulation. Remember that articulation is difficulty producing sounds. It's not rule based overall, right? With articulation, consonants are what is impacted. Vowels very seldomly are impacted with an articulation, really not at all. Um, and then remembering that someone can have an articulation delay without any reason, or it could be due to secondary to something else like developmental delay, injury. Um, with articulation, you can have incredibly unintelligible speech, or you can just have some difficulties understanding them. So thinking about someone that you know who is in kindergarten and they're saying like wed for red, right? That would be a phonological, or not a phonological, an articulation error. When we're talking about our articulation errors, there's four different types. The first one is an omission. That's when someone leaves out or does not produce a specific sound. Second is substitutions. This is where we substitute one sound for another sound. Like I just talked about that w for like weeding for reading. Distortions, it sounds like what it should, but it's just not the right sound, right? It's just a little off. So saying like a sound where when we're making our S, the sound is coming out the sides, right? So a lateralized lisp, or you can have an interdental lisp where your tongue's sneaking out through the front, right? So it's almost right, but it's not, is a distortion. Um, and then additions. So this is where we add a sound or a syllable to a word. It can be typical in development, but it should reduce as they're getting older. And that's true with a lot of our articulation errors. They can be developmentally appropriate. And then as you get older, they're expected to reduce, right? So by the age of 4, we're expecting for children to be 100% intelligible. That doesn't mean that they might not still have some articulation or phonological disorder or difficulty, but they should be able to be understood 100% of the time. So next is phonological processes. Any questions on articulation before I move forward? Awesome. No questions. Okay. Um, Next, we're going to talk about phonological processes. Feel like we talked about this so long ago, right? So it's really good to refresh. You have to be able to identify the phonological process based on a child produces this for that. What process are they exhibiting, right? That's going to be on your final. So phonological processes, we know that they are predictable error patterns overall. Some common ones are cluster simplification. This is where a child simplifies a consonant sequence by deleting one or more of the consonants. Uh, Deaffrication. It's when an affricative is substituted for a fricative. So, um, sorry, for would be an example of deaffrication. Next, we have deletion of final consonants. So this is when the final consonant in a word is deleted. Now remember, in a word like bake, right? We're not cutting off the E because that is not part of the IPA. So whenever you're doing these questions, your best way to do it is even in your brain on your little scratch paper that you have, write them into IPA and then decide what the process is. Because if I say bake and now they're saying bake, right? you have to know that it's a deletion of a final consonant. That's what's coming off. The vowel isn't really there at the end because we're not doing English spelling. Final devoicing is when we delete the voicing in the final voiced consonant. So if it's a word like Bob, it becomes bop. Initial voicing is when a person produces a voiced consonant at the beginning, so at the word initial position, instead of a devoiced consonant. So saying like instead of pop, we're going bop. Liquid simplification is our next one. This is where we're replacing L and R with W and Y overall. This is a very common one. I know I've shared a few times before. This is why I was in speech as a younger kid because I did not, all my R's were W's. Um, Next is fronting. So this is where we have a palatal or a velar consonant usually, right? And then they get fronted to an alveolar um, consonant. So it's coming front in the mouth. We're moving from back of the mouth to the front to produce something simpler. I see that we have a question. Is gliding also an acceptable answer for liquid simplification? Yes, it is. It is. A good question. So another example of fronting would be tat for cat, dud for good, tutti for cookie, right? Our next phonological process is stopping. So this is where we're using one of our sounds. We're stopping our airflow when the airflow should be held onto. So thinking about dis for this, right? Or to for shoe. That sound we can hold on to is now the airflow is stopping to create a different sound. Syllable reduction is when a child produces a fewer number of syllables than is what is in the target word. So like nana for banana, butterfly for butterfly. Usually 3-syllable words are being produced as 2-syllable words for the most part. Any questions on those phonological processes? Again, we're going to do some practice as we go. Awesome. Okay. So next is dysarthria. When we're talking about dysarthria, you want to remember we're talking about the strength, the speed, the timing, direction, and range of motor speed, speech movements. Okay, this is where we have damage to the CNS or the PNS. And the aspects of the impaired speech and dysarthria depend on the location of the damage. So remembering that there are 6 types, right? We have flaccid, which is weak, spastic, think about muscle spasms with that one. Ataxic is where we find our drunk sounding speech.
Okay.
Hypokinetic is where hypo, so reduced.
I'm not even taking
Um,
like no shit. Like I just want to know what she's talking.
I
But
think somebody is not muted. Let me see if I can help you.
sorry.
Oh, it's okay. No problem. Thank you. You're more than welcome to stay unmuted too. Do you have a question?
No, I don't. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. Perfect. Um, and then hyperkinetic is where we have extra and more extra involuntary movements overall. And then mixed is your most common one, which is where there's some aspects of more than one type of dysarthria. So those are our dysarthrias. Now, remembering dysarthria versus apraxia. Dysarthria is a weakness, apraxia is not. Apraxia is a difficulty with motor planning. It's a difficulty with the programming associated with the incorrect neural commands. It can be acquired or developmental. You know that some signs and symptoms are a tendency to grope for words or sounds, so like trying to reach for them. Rote or automatic speech is often better. So thinking about like your ABCs and counting, especially in acquired apraxia of speech. Substitutions are the most common error types. You see vowel errors with apraxia, and that's one of your big red flags that it is apraxia of speech is some vowel errors as well. And then inconsistent productions of the same word. So it's not the same error every single time. When we're talking about apraxia of speech, we have two types. We have that childhood apraxia of speech and then acquired apraxia of speech. Acquired happens because of a stroke, traumatic brain injury, a tumor, surgical trauma, any neurodegenerative diseases. While when we're talking about childhood apraxia of speech, it's something a child is born with and the cause is unknown overall. Okay. Questions on apraxia? Perfect. Love it. Um, Next, we just went over organic speech disorders, but remembering to understand what cleft palate is, right? So cleft palate is when the two sides of the palate don't fuse together, and it causes an opening in the roof of the mouth into the nasal cavity. And then your ankyloglossia. It's your tongue tie. One day I'm going to get great at saying that word. I have to practice it more. Glossus, think about your tongue, anchored tongue, right? So speech development, tongue tie does not necessarily impair speech. Many individuals compensate well. It can impact articulation though and make it imprecise at speed because our tongue has a little bit less range of motion with that tongue tie there. Make sure you review your learning theories like behavioral, cognitive, humanistic, experimental, and social, right? And understand what a multisensory approach is overall. Now the fun time. We're going to go into a quiz. Let me start at the beginning. Okay, so in order to do this, let me copy. I will send it in the chat. You should be able to click on that and join to be able to participate in the the questions. Awesome. I've been told a few times that it's pretty easy to do, so I'm hoping. Okay, perfect. Let's see, we have 9 people on there, 10 participants. Perfect. Okay, so speech disorders and phonetics. We're going to first start with our IPA and our anatomy. So first question, what is the anatomy on the roof of your mouth just behind your upper teeth and in front of your hard palate? All right, let's show our correct answer. Alveolar ridge, that is the correct answer. So when you have your tongue right behind your teeth, think about your alveolar sounds or your and your tongue comes up and touches that alveolar ridge. When making your top teeth touch your what? Awesome. Yep, your lip. So your bottom lip or your lip, but thinking about your teeth touching there. What is place, manner, and voicing for that phoneme? Okay, let's look at our responses. Okay, it seems like we're very close to everyone agreeing. So first, the sound that that phoneme makes is g, g. So first, let's do voicing. The way we're going to find out if it's voiced or not, we're going to feel g, g. That is voiced, right? Okay, and then where is it occurring in the back? I can feel it back here, right? G, g, g. I can feel my velum. It's a velar. And then can I hold on to the sound? G. No, the sound that I would hold on to is that afterwards that I'm producing. So it is a stop. Place, manner, voicing for that phoneme. Let's see our answers. Okay, voiceless. So let's test it out. First of all, that phoneme is so. Sorry, I just lost everything. So that is a voiceless sound. We do not feel our vocal cords vibrating when we make it, right? With that, where is it being produced in my mouth? Lingual alveolar, so an alveolar sound. And then voice, oh, and manner. We can hold on to it. It does not stop. Great job. So it's a fricative. Sorry. It is a fricative. Place, manner, voicing for this sound. Okay, let's look at our responses. So our sound, first of all, is mm, mm. So it is voiced. Mm. You can feel the voicing there. Um, and it is an alveolar sound. And it is a nasal. Mm. How many sounds in check? Okay, let's look at our responses. Three, great job. Ch, F, check, three sounds. Which of these sounds are labial dental sounds? Okay, F and V and V. Labial is your lip, dental, teeth, teeth on lip. How many sounds in sleep? Sleep. Okay, let's look. Sleep. Four sounds. Full E, four sounds. The area above the glottis that includes the pharynx, oral, and nasal cavities is the, okay, let's look. Good. So remembering that the area above, supra, sub below, submarine. True or false? The CNS includes the brain and spinal cord. True or false? Okay, let's look at our responses. True. Yes, it is true. The CNS, the central nervous system, includes the brain and spinal cord. The sound is in what position of the word cat? Let's look at our responses. The initial, yep, at the beginning of the word. Ah, Let's go into articulation. So when an individual uses w for it is considered what type of articulation error? When we're talking about articulation error. Okay. It is a substitution, remembering that a distortion is more of your lisps, like when we have our interdental lisp and the tongue is coming out through the middle, or when we have our airflow problem with the lateralized lisp. Substitution, we're putting one sound in the place of the other. When an individual adds at the end of the word, it is considered what type of articulation error? Okay, let's see. Addition, correct. Right, they're adding something on at the end. When an individual exhibits a lateralized lisp, it is considered what type of articulation error? It is a distortion. It is a distortion. So we're changing a sound there, but it just doesn't sound right, right? Substitution would be you're saying a whole different sound. When an individual drops the g in dog, it is considered what type of articulation error? Hmm? Omission. Yep. So we're omitting the sound. We're not including it in there in the production. Okay, now we're going to dive into phonology and questions that relate to phonology. Name that phonological process. So the child, human person produces doi for toy. What is the phonological process? Producing doi for toy. Okay, let's look at responses. Initial voicing. Yep, so initial voicing, we're starting out with oi is voiceless, right? And then the thing that we're changing about that is the d doi. And we also talked about it's a phonological process, right? So remembering that substitution is not a phonological process, it's an articulation. Um, it's articulation, right? Fronting is not correct because we're staying in the same position. And d are in the same spot. They're both alveolar sounds. However, the only difference between the two of them, so we're not stopping that sound because I can't hold d as much as I can't hold t, right? So the only difference between those two sounds is their voicing. So make sure you're like looking at the sound that is the target sound, which would be t, and then the sound that is being replaced in the place of it, and see what's different about the two. Let's try the next one. Name that phonological process produces cool for school. Also, please remember these should be hard right now, right? If you haven't studied too much yet, you haven't reviewed the phonological processes yet, this should be a little harder, and that's okay. Make sure you're taking it as a learning experience and you're taking it as something to note to make sure to study more for. Okay, let's look at responses. Cluster reduction, cluster simplification, yes. That is the right answer. So thinking about school, sk is a blend and it's two consonants together. What's changing from school to cool is that first sound has come off. We know it's a consonant cluster because the two consonants are together. One is coming off. Initial consonant deletion, I can see the thought process for that one, right? But in this, there's a consonant cluster that is reduced, and that is our main point, not the if it was in initial consonant deletion, both of those would be taken off at that point. In a word with an S blend at the beginning. So it'd be more like op for stop or ool for school at that point. Okay, name that phonological process. Produces two for shoe. Okay, let's look at our responses. Stopping. Yep, this is stopping. So they're producing two for shoe. Think about deaffrication. We're talking about deaffrication. It would be more of your sh for ch, not taking a. So when we're thinking about someone starting with sh, ooh, and then ooh. We're looking at what is the difference between sh and t. We cannot hold on to t, is a stop sound. So that's your difference between the two, right? They're both voiceless sounds. They're both in that alveolar position. Um, or sorry, wait. They are both, yeah, in the alveolar. No, I'm sorry. Sh is palatal, right? And t is alveolar. But when we're talking about this, the client or student or person is stopping the sound. So that makes our t from the sh sound. So this is stopping. Name that phonological process. Produces mashes for matches. So this one is where we see our deaffrication. Um, we went from ch to sh in this one. So that's deaffrication. Assimilation, remember, that's not one of, I understand assimilation overall, but it's not one of our phonological processes that we talked about. So remember that like we're going to be using most of the words that we've talked about in the course overall. So I would suggest just reviewing again the phonological processes that we talked about in this course. It's easy to mix up all the courses, especially if you're taking another one with some phonological processes in them. Um, Name that phonological process produces sta for stop. Ah, I forgot to hide the answers. Okay. Oh, oops. The um the phonological process reproduces sta for stop. This is final consonant deletion. That consonant in the final position is now gone. Right. When we're talking about apraxia and dysarthria, and I think this goes into a little bit more than that too. Apraxia is due to weakness. True or false? Okay, this is false, right? Motor planning when we're talking about apraxia. A motor speech. Motor planning speech disorder is okay. Apraxia. Yep, that is correct. Which one? Weakness is associated with dysarthria. Correct. What is the most common type of dysarthria? Okay, let's look. Mixed is the most common type of dysarthria. And a characteristic of apraxia is a tendency to grope for words or sounds. True or false? It is true. Apraxia, you see people with a tendency to grope for sounds or words. The cause of childhood apraxia of speech is a lack of oxygen during birth. True or false? False. False is correct on this one. Remembering that the cause of childhood apraxia of speech is unknown. In a multisensory treatment approach, you use all of the above: auditory, visual, tactile, and kinesthetic learning. That's the end. So remembering that if this was really hard, making sure, sorry, one second. It's nice to be able to see myself. Hmm. So when you are at home and you are studying or wherever you do your studying, and you're watching this and it's like, oh man, that was really hard. Instead of getting discouraged, make sure that you take that as points to now review, right? That's what this is for. It's understanding what areas do you understand the best and what areas do you need to brush up on, what areas need to be a little bit more on your note card than others, right? Making sure to take the time to just do your self check and make sure you're preparing the best as possible for yourself in order to make sure that you are confident going into your exam. So my words usually for test taking are preparation, refresh, and pause, right? Making sure that you're using those simple different strategies in order to set yourself up for success. If you have questions, please feel free to ask. I'm here for it. Thank you.